Welcome to Season 5 of the Lead with Coffee podcast, where we continue the journey into how you can change the culture in your business and your home through simple leadership practices. Grab a cup of coffee and get ready to join into today's conversation. Welcome back to Lead with Coffee. Today we want to talk about lessons learned from when everything goes wrong.
Has that happened recently?
Oh, man. Do you ever feel like you have those days, weeks, or even years in your business when it feels like everything that could go wrong just did or continues to? What do you do to stay resilient and try to break the cycle? In today's episode, we want to talk about how we take on big challenges and then what the lessons we learn from them, as each one brings us something unique. Some challenges help to refine our systems, tweak our teams, or look outside of our box to see how we can serve clients better. And man, we have been going through a season of challenges.
Yeah.
And it just feels like, of course that happened, because if it could have gone any worse, I'm not sure it could have, right? Because that's just how this season seems to go. But what we know is that we will be resilient. We will learn from it. We will adapt our systems so it doesn't happen again. And that's where we are as a company. And today we're just going to be transparent with you about what it looks like when everything goes wrong and how you actually learn from it versus just let it crumble you.
Yeah, we're going to take these tests and turn them into a testimony. I'm going to preach it right now. It's true, though, because we know that everything that we've gone through in the past has always worked out in a way because it's prepared us for the future.
Yeah.
And the way I see what's going on, look, you and I are stepping into big things, whether it be CBSI as a business or the Bar in San Diego or even Lead with Coffee. We're doing things that a lot of people aren't willing to step into, and we're just like, let's go for it. We have these big dreams that we've talked about for years, and we're going to step into them. And stepping into them, as you step farther in, there are more challenges. Mm-hmm. And we know that as believers in God, that He tests us to prepare us for what's next. Mm-hmm. And we lift everything that we have up to Him, knowing that we are serving something greater, and knowing that the things that we are doing are preparing us for whatever that future is. And what we have noticed is we have a plan or a dream that we're pretty focused on, mm-hmm. but by the time we get there, it has changed enough because our perspectives have changed, and we've learned a few things to know that it's not exactly what we thought it was going to be, mm-hmm. but in the end, it's actually even better. So I feel that we continue to be in a season of challenges and hard things, knowing that there's a lot more coming out on the other end.
Yeah, I like to say that we're in a season of God's refining, because you really are having to be pressed and pushed and refined in this season. And it feels like a season of testing. It feels like a season where people are waiting for you to fail. But I think when you go in with the perspective of this is just another thing that I'm going to get through. Yeah. And it's going to be hard, but I'm going to get through it, and because it's setting me up for something in the future. And so an example of just the last 10 days, it feels like 10 months, but the last 10 days, we stepped into a project about 1.5 years ago that was something we'd never done before. And we always like to put the quote out recently that your overwhelm today is answer to God's blessings of what you asked for. Yeah. And 1.5 years ago, we said, man, we really feel like this area of the business is something we can expand on. And within like 2 hours, we had a phone call offering us a almost $2 million contract to just do exactly what we asked for. It was answered prayer. And today it is stress and overwhelm and all these things, but it is the result of answered prayer.
But let me stop you for a second. We said we should get into this part of this type of business. We didn't realize that what God had was this massive piece of a massive project that we had no idea that we'd even have a chance to be part of.
Yeah, that's so true. So we were going in for this small piece, and the company said, well, you did great on your proposal for that small piece, but we actually want you to do this whole other area, which is 4 times the size of that small piece. We think you're more equipped for that. And we hadn't done it in that scale before, but we stepped in with a yes, because look, if we're going to put it out there and have that type of bold faith, and if we're going to get it, it means that we're qualified to do it. And it doesn't mean we have to have all the answers, but it means we better be ready to be all in to figure it out. And so we went all in for the last year and a half, and now here we are in the kind of finishing stages of this project, and it is the most visible part of the project. And part of what we do in project management is you do a lot of behind the scenes planning, a lot of behind the scenes business side of things for clients. And then maybe you have, this period of time where you're on site with them, and you always look forward to that on site time, because you get to build relationship with them in person and really show why they hired you to be excellent at what you do, because you've spent a year and a half, with them. And now it's like, okay, it's game time. Right? So it's like prepping for your football game for a year and getting your one moment to play, and then everything goes wrong in that one moment, and you feel like, well, that ought to do it. They're never going to work with me again. So, the last 10 days have been just a whirlwind, and we were running a project, and we had an incident on the project, and we had trained all the staff. We had been prepared. We were aligned with all the processes, but it doesn't matter how much you prepare. In the moment that chaos happens, people are going to respond however they're going to respond, and they're going to make all the wrong decisions of how they should have responded, or outside influences will be a part of what happens to you. So we had an incident, and rather than following the procedures, the individual went to an individual that wasn't a part of the organization, and they made their own procedures. And so then now you're in this whirlwind as a leader of a project, having to spend days and days and days unraveling how this went wrong on so many levels, why it went wrong, and the impact it had as you had to stop work, figure out what happened, make sure everybody's okay, and then re-implement all new systems, because on the surface it looked like you failed, and it felt like everything was going wrong that could go wrong. And I know in one of our last podcasts, I don't remember which one it was, but I was talking about what I know about myself and failure is that if I have a day of failure, I'm going to go home and process it and come back the next day with a whole new strategy. I'm not going to go back in the way I was. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened on this one.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because, we do so many projects, and we try to do everything we can to make sure that anything that could go wrong, we have a plan for it. Like Sarah said, things can happen and people go off the rails, and it just happened to be where no one was around to help make those right decisions. And it seemed like a lot of blame, and this is where the CSI of CBSI comes out, where we try to do our investigation to really, and Sarah and Sandy, we call them the fact girls, because they go for all the facts, not feelings, not assumptions, but let's figure out the facts. And once the facts were out, there just didn't seem to be as much blame in one direction. There was failures at a lot of different levels, and it was good for us to know that confidence-wise that we had done a lot, and there was the thing still happened, but there were more failures in that were outside of just us. Mm-hmm. And so being able to collect those facts and get the real story, it gets our confidence back, like, hey, we didn't completely mess this thing up. But it also allows to have a bigger conversation with others involved and say, okay, as a team, what are our lessons learned, and how do we avoid being in this situation again? Because I think that there were so many people blindsided and then assumed what had happened. And that was the part that we learned from, that we were listening to stories from people in positions that we should have been able to hear what they say, that it was fact, not realizing that there were assumptions. Everyone had assumptions, and the facts weren't all in place until we started digging into it. And so again, I think the lesson learned is you yourself or your team need to get rid of the feelings. The feelings are gone. Something happened, and start tracing the facts. And the facts are going to reveal the true story and truly what happened, and will prepare you better for the next time around.
I think when everything goes wrong, you go into your day and you're mentally ready for it. You're showing up. You're feeling like you have a groove, and we all have these days. Like the fires just keep coming, and you're just like, I cannot handle one more. And then it happens again and again and again. And you feel like, okay, I fixed that one, and now this one's going in that one. And it's like, what am I doing wrong? And so I think that's where that self-reflection, that lesson learned, when you're in the fire, when you're in the arena like we talk about, you're in a battle, and you have to be ready when you're a leader to deal with a lot of different things that are going to happen to you. And some days, everything that could go wrong is going to go wrong. And that's also just the devil just attacking you, right? Looking for your weakness. And you might be getting set up for a really big success, and he's going to do everything he can to take you out. And what I always love is Christine Caine's reminder that even on your worst day, the devil didn't take you out. You're still here, you're still standing, you're still fighting. And so you have to think about when you have these days when everything goes wrong and you just want to quit because you're just like, I can't even figure out like how to repair this. You're gonna have feelings. You're gonna go through it all. You're gonna first be in shock of what you're dealing with, and then you're gonna start to process it, and you're gonna get angry about how much blame you got before anyone actually, figured out what really happened. But if you're in charge, look, you gotta own it, right? So it's like, I'm in charge. My person had a safety incident. Like, that's on me. I don't know how, who, what, when. I don't have all the details, but the person who's in charge of this, has to own this in the beginning at least. But then you got to come back, and you got to step back out of all, like David said, out of all those feelings, and then you got to figure it out. And so what happens to me typically is I'll go through kind of the emotions, but I'll go through them really quickly. And then once I kind of hit that like, oh, I'm pissed mode, that's when Fact Girl comes out, because then it's like, well, let's just start living in facts, because I don't need to live in the emotions of it all, because that's typically what people are looking for from a female leader that you're going to be emotional. And so that's what Sandy and I have really impressed on female leaders for my entire career is like, you're allowed to feel how you feel, but they're looking for you to show those feelings. And the more that you can just come back and be factual about it, it takes the emotion out of it for you. And so then it's kind of a game on. It's like, oh, you want to play? Like, let's play. And part of that is not, I need to win and I need to prove that you're wrong. It's just like, I'm going to pause and figure this out. And when I figure that out, it might be 100% my fault that I didn't lead that day right. Or it might be a little bit of everybody. And that's typically what happens, right? It's a little bit of every circumstance that kind of manifested into this big trifecta of things that went wrong. And that's what happened to us. And so taking time to reflect and to just discuss it, talking it out sometimes can really help you process these difficult days when it feels like everything's going wrong. But then what are you going to do so it doesn't happen again?
Right.
Right.
Well, and before we get into that, I also want to say it 100% matters to we as leaders of how emotionally we handle it. When we have all the eyes on us, are we going to overreact? Are we going to be prideful? Are we going to be arrogant? Are we going to be angry? Or are we going to listen calmly, get all the information, and go back and to approach it with, in a very professional manner? And I think that's the difference of where you can go right or go wrong with your team and the people that are around you. Because if you're instantly, the first thing that comes out of your mouth is an excuse, or a blame or anything like that, and you're not owning it and you're not handling it in a calm fashion, you've lost your credibility. You've completely lost your credibility. Or are you going to lead well, lead strong, and strong being confident in yourself to know that you really know how to get through a situation like this? And we've talked about it before on the podcast, where I was talking about Jocko and his whole thing, where, as a Navy SEAL, that in a situation, it's always detach and step back. Look at the bigger picture of what's going on and quit just looking down the barrel of the gun of what's right in front of you. It's like, well, we got to look at bigger picture here. I need to take myself out of the emotions. I need to take myself out of the situation to be able to look at it as a whole. And that is something that every leader needs to learn how to do, and every parent needs to learn how to do. And I think that's really important for several reasons. And I think a week later, being back on the site every day, there is a different level of respect for you and Sandy on how you handled the situation, from not only the crew below you, but everyone that you were working with, because they understood it wasn't emotional. You got them every ounce of information they asked for, and you presented it. And I would say, for the most part, you presented more than they ever expected or that they're used to receiving. And I think that says a lot for you and Sandy as leaders.
Yeah, so I think that as we kind of pull it back a little bit, for us, we were so focused on implementing the project and letting them see us at our best. And actually them seeing us at our best was when everything went wrong. And that's probably what they're going to remember the most about us.
Yeah.
Not how well we implemented the plan. It was how quickly we adapted to the chaos happening inside the project. And that could have severely impacted, a couple of organizations. And I think that is the unexpected leadership stuff that comes up all the time, right? It's how do you respond in crisis? How do you respond when everything's going wrong? And like you said, are you blaming everybody, or are you stepping back? And everyone was looking down the barrel of the gun at us. No one wanted to step back. And for us, this was a really critical incident. Someone got hurt on this incident, and there was a lot of blame going on really quickly about not following protocol, or was he not wearing his safety gloves when he hurt himself? And so we're stepping back and we're saying like there's a lot of assumptions, and you want us to step in and give you our assumptions. And what we're doing is we're just standing here I had to stand in a room with 15 high-level leaders, including presidents of a company, while I was in the crossfire, and never really wavered in our belief that, one, the individual matters more. How are they doing? What's the care they got? What's going on with them? Because that's really the heart of who we are as a company. We're about the people. And then, yes, let's walk into all the processes. How did it go wrong? How can we do it better on both sides of the organization so that this doesn't happen to somebody again? And as you keep wanting us to make assumptions, know that I'm not going to make assumptions. That's not what I'm here for. I'm just here to give you facts. And down to the point that if someone wasn't wearing their proper attire, would there have been a more obvious circumstance? Would there have been obvious, would there have been blood if he wasn't wearing proper stuff or not, right? I think all these things where if you step back and go well, that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And if it doesn't make sense, don't just put an assumption on it,
Absolutely.
Right? No matter what your situation is, you've got to step back and ask questions. And I think that's what we've done in leadership a lot. Whenever something's going wrong, ask questions. Don't try to be the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
Ask questions. Figure it out, right? And someone's going to know something somewhere that's going to help you kind of have the lesson learned as we go back to the main core of it. Like, what's the lesson learned so this doesn't happen again?
Yeah, and whether that's, what we went through or just a project in general. And for us, we're going to refer to construction projects and relocations because that's what we focus on. And there are lessons to be learned on every single project. And one of the main things is, if it happened on that project, what are we going to do? What are we going to put in place so it doesn't happen on the next project? And it could simply be one more question that we need to ask.
Yeah.
or it could be we need to completely change the procedure because the scheduling was messed up and the trucking was wrong and all those things. So there's so many different levels on it. And we've had to learn this over the years, and because we didn't always spend the time to do it, to really just sit back, and whether it's an emergency situation or after the end of the project, to stop and reflect. Go back over your days with your team, or if it's just you yourself, to what went really well and what didn't go really well, and how can we fix that. And that's the lessons learned. That's the important part. It's great to learn lessons, but if you don't implement change, you're just going to keep repeating them. And for us, again, as a small business, navigating change, delivering excellence is our tagline, and we can't say that unless we are going to learn lessons from past mistakes or past situations that we don't change. Mm-hmm. If we spend the time to do what it takes to make those changes up front, number one, we get more efficient. Number two, there's less of a chance of running into that particular issue. And if something else comes up that's similar, we can still use the same guidelines, procedures, basis of how we're going to move forward from what we learned on the last one. And I think that's the most important thing, is we don't just go to work every day and do the same thing over and over again. Mm-hmm. It's about how do we become more efficient, how do we become better leaders, how do we become a better company, and doing that is really checking the work that you've done in the past and making the shifts and changes that you need to become a better company tomorrow.
Yeah. Leadership is hard. I think that's the piece that we forget about. And when everything goes wrong, you can easily fall into the why me. But then you got to remember, like, you asked for this. You wanted to be a leader, which means that you have the ability to lead through it. You're going to grow through it. It's not always going to be fun. And I think what we have learned, especially over the last few years, is that challenges are going to keep coming. They're going to be in a new fancy little box all ready for you, like a little gift.
Weren't expecting that
one,
were you?
And it's going to come to you, and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. And you're going to open that gift, and it's going to like explode. You're going to be like, what? I thought this was going to be amazing.
Yeah.
By the way, it's life. Nothing ever goes exactly the way it's supposed to. But being able to know that you have the ability to go through it, to grow through it, to be humble, to walk into it, to not fight your way out of it until you've grown your way through it. I think that's the biggest piece that I've learned over the years is stop fighting it. You're going to be in a hard storm for a minute. It's your buffalo story you love to tell, like run away or run into it. You just told it on the 2 podcasts ago. And so when you're in a season where everything is going wrong, or a day when everything is going wrong, don't run from it. As much as you want to run from it, you have to do the work. You got into it. You're equipped to get through it. You might not enjoy it. You might need to go walk around your garden and deep breathe for like 3 hours, and your family's wondering, are you having a mental breakdown? But they're going to see you the next day, get out of bed, go do it again, and you're going to come back stronger because you've figured out another layer of it. And whether it is how you get through it or something that you didn't see the day before, because when chaos is happening, you're not seeing it clearly, right? You're leading through it. And I think that is one of the strengths that Sandy and I have. We're actually better leaders in chaos than we are in calm. Chaos forces us to be in our element, and when we're in it, you know, you're not always getting that outside perspective, and then you come home and you pause and you reflect, and it's like, wait, they're seeing it different than I'm seeing it. And so where am I going wrong here, right?
So should we rename this Lessons Learned, what it's like to be a chaos coordinator?
It is. I feel like the last 15 years have been chaos coordination, but sometimes that's just how life works, right? But you know that, like, we were equipped to be there in that moment for this time, and we know that no one else in the organization would have been ready to do what we did, because the fact girls were what was required for this particular case, right?
Well, and so let me add to that, because of, you know, how God laid out this situation, because you were not supposed to be there that morning.
No.
We had an interview for another opportunity. come up that day. And so we, had staff moved around to be able to cover where Sarah was going to be absent. And that interview got postponed a couple of days before. So it was like, okay, Sarah's going to be there, no problem. So as upset as we were, like, oh, we really were ready for this interview, and, we don't want to have to wait. It was the right thing, and we know only God can lay that stuff out. Mm-hmm. And so Sarah and Sandy were on site and ready for this when it happened. So for those of you that are, question belief, I tell you, that's why I'm saying a test into a testimony, because we've seen it so many times where what we thought was going to be the best thing didn't work out how we wanted it to work out, mm-hmm. but it actually worked out the way it was supposed to, and the turnout was even better because we were more prepared for the situation.
Yeah, and I think my perspective as a female leader on a 99% male job site, when something goes wrong, they're just looking at you like, well, you're not qualified to be here. So you're even in this second layer of like, not only am I qualified to be here, I'm going to stand in front of you and I'm going to answer all your questions, and I'm not going to be emotional because I can do this, and you can watch me do this, and you can continue to try to blame me for the problems that are happening. But there's a big picture here, and we're all a part of how we make this better, so it doesn't happen again to anyone. Whether it's my team member or your team member, we're all supposed to be on the same team, and I think that's also part of the lesson learned, that you have to know people's motive. And when you're working with other large organizations, everyone has their own motive. They all want to make themselves look good. And
protect themselves.
And they want to protect themselves. And you have to know that while you are also trying to protect yourself, that someone has to actually lead through this. And they're going to blame all the way through, right? And they're going to keep silent on the things they want to keep silent. And they're going to be very loud on the things they want to be very loud at. And it's your job, if you're the person standing in the front line, to not waver. Just not waver on the truth that you know is true, and don't step into assumptions. That's my biggest advice for anyone kind of going through something like we went through, where it just feels like everything that could go wrong did go wrong. You don't have to own responsibility for every element of what went wrong. You have to understand what happened so it doesn't happen again, and make changes. So we instantly made changes. Some they recommended, and some that we said, like, this is a practice we need to change on our end, mm-hmm. because we want to make sure that we have the full story as quickly as possible. And part of what happens when everything's going wrong, you're trusting the people around you to do their part, but their motive is different than your motive. So they're doing their part in a way that's protecting them, not you, right? And so as a leader, I just encourage you, if there's something going wrong in your organization, make sure you're hearing all sides of the story before you make your judgment, because it's really critical. Because if you make that judgment too fast, it's hard to pull it back. You may lose employees, you may lose clients, you may lose people's respect because you jumped a gun and assigned blame on a team member or on a team, where at the end of the day, it's a collaborative effort, and if it fails, everybody fails, by the way, right? And I think that's what we learned over the last few weeks, is that it wasn't just like one person failed. Like, the whole project fails when you're spending hours and hours and hours investigating what went wrong to try not to do it again.
We appreciate that you decided to hang out and spend some time with us discussing life and leadership. It would mean the world to us if you would share this episode on social media to increase our online presence. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a minute to rate it and review it wherever you listen. Mahalo!